So this section is about intestinal protozoa, very important pathogens and parasites, and quite commonly found as well in the United States, probably some of the most common ones you'll find. So welcome to this clinical investigation. As we peer through the lens into the microscopic world, our objective is to identify and differentiate the diverse agents of gastrointestinal parasitic diseases. These invisible intruders, unicellular eukaryotic parasites, present significant diagnostic challenges due to their size and the nuances of their morphology. Success in the lab and the clinic depends on your ability to distinguish a dangerous pathogen from a harmless bystander. Our mission today is to move beyond simple observation and into the realm of definite clinical identification. So the spectrum of protozoal diseases is very wide-ranging. Everything from asymptomatic carriage, which can cause to larger outbreaks, acute diarrhea, which is often in the clinics, that's often stool samples what you find. You can get chronic disease where malabsorption, weight loss, and other symptoms occur. You get severe dysentery, more inflammation than diarrhea, so you see other symptoms and blood in the stool usually, and then extraintestinal invasion, which can lead to liver abscesses. So the symptoms of protozoal intestinal parasites varies quite readily. The difficult really is to distinguish between a common organism found in the intestine and an actual parasite, a pathogen, and that can be really quite tricky. A lot of these organisms are closely related. For example, Entamoeba histolytica and Entamoeba dispar. They're both amoebas and they look very similar, so that's very small differential characteristic that needs to be understood. So again, for the studying for the exam, definitely have images of all these organisms and try to recognize the different ones. That's really important. One important aspect to understand when you look at a fecal sample and a spear is the difference between the trophozoite, which is an active moving stage, and the cyst. So the trophozoite is motile, feeding, and it also multiplies. It's typically found in liquid or diuretic stool with rapid transit, and because when it's exposed to oxygen and air, it very quickly changes into a cyst form, which is protective. The cyst is a dormant environmental resistant stage and is protected by a thick wall. So typically found in formed stools or after the stool has been exposed to oxygen for a while. And it's usually also the agent of transmission because it's resistant and it can survive for days or weeks outside the host as well. So know what you're looking for, and it can be quite tricky to find them because amoebas oftentimes, especially when you put them on the microscope, first of all, it has to be a very fresh sample, and also when you put them on the microscope, they usually often stop moving, and so it can be quite tricky to actually find them. So the Entamoeba complex. The amoeba move via pseudopodia, which is just like elongation of their cells, and it's sometimes again tricky to see the movement per se, and it's often not enough for diagnosis because you have relatives that look very, very similar. Also, the size is very important. So the trophozoites, for example, for Entamoeba histolytica, are about the same as the Entamoeba coli, and so it can be really quite difficult. So again, for you studying for the exam, look at the different images and especially also remember the sizes. A lot of times they're really asking for the different microns of the different parasites. All right, so the clues in motion is you can distinguish the Giardias, the Entamoeba, and the Balantioides because they're very different organisms. One is a flagella, the other one looks like an amoeba, and the other one has cilia all over its body. The Giardia is actually a really cute parasite, and it looks like a sort of a smiley face or like an old man with a beard, and the movement is like a falling leaf, so that it tumbles. It's pear-shaped, and it's quite easy to recognize in this form. If it's a cyst, it's definitely a little bit more challenging. You can also see that it has 2 nuclei, and it sort of looks like eyes staring at you. And it's pretty large as well, so they're quite easy to recognize. But if you don't find them, you may look for other parasites. The Dientamoeba fragilis, again, it's an amoeba, and it is smaller than the Giardia, and also similar to the Balantioides coli. So some of the parasites are much easier to identify when you stain them. So the acid-fast coccidia are easy to recognize. So usually if you do a standard ova and parasite technique, you often will miss these pathogens and these parasites. So if you have a diuretic stool and you don't see anything, definitely continue with the acid-fast or modified acid-fast stain, and then you can see a lot of these parasites fairly easily. And again, you can see a lot of them look quite similar. So Cryptosporidium and Cyclospora definitely look fairly similar on a first look. And again, look at the size and also at the intracellular characteristics. The tissues invader, that's a really quite much more severe pathogen as well. Some of the diuretic parasites, they are often self-healing, but if the tissues are invaded or if the liver is damaged, that is definitely a completely different cup of tea. So the Entamoeba histolytica adheres to the colonic mucosa and destroys the host cells via cell nibbling, trogocytosis. It produces cysteine proteinases to degrade this extracellular matrix, and it creates a characteristic flask-shaped ulcers. The evidence is finding the trophozoites, and it can cause amoebic liver abscess. Not very often, but it can happen if it's a very severe case as well. The Giardia is a very common pathogen. So when you know that people were, for example, hiking or camping and didn't have clean water, that's very often where Giardia is the causative agent. And the trophozoites firmly attached to the duodenal and jejunal mucosa and with a ventral sucking disc. So it basically stops absorption of nutrients, and it's very explosive and foul-smelling diarrhea, but usually there's no blood in the stool. It's common in daycare centers as well, and then the traveler's diarrhea. And it's also called beaver fever because beavers can't contaminate the water in the wild as well. Cryptosporidium is definitely a very interesting one, and there have been outbreaks in the past from water contamination, even in water facilities. So that can be a problem if there's a contamination from wild animals. Pathogenesis, Cryptosporidium invades the intestinal epithelial cells, and it features a unique auto-infection cycle. So the cells can reproduce and then can infect again the same host, which leads to a prolonged disease. And clinical picture, if it's a healthy host, it's usually self-limiting, but immunocompromised hosts can have life-threatening dehydration as well. So in terms of diagnosis, there are different techniques that are used. Microscopy is obviously most of the time the first method of examination, which for most of the parasitic diseases it is, but nowadays they do have multiplex PCR panels, which is faster and often more reliable as well to detect the parasitic DNA. And there are fluorescent immunoassays, and they can be used as well, and it's quite commonly used in clinical lab. So couple of more pathogens. The microsporidias are a little bit of a sort of a really odd one out, and they used to be classified with the parasites I just talked about, but now they're really more related to fungal pathogens. And it's a really important group of suspects as well. And they are obligate intracellular parasites. So these are the only eukaryotic GI pathogens that are intracellular. And one common organism is the Enterocytozoan benusi, and a couple of other species as well. The infective spores uses a unique coiled polar tube to inject its contents into the host cell, and it also can be recognized in a fecal stain. The stains are usually, the recommended stains are the Weber green or the Ryan blue stain, a modified trichrome stain, and fluorescent stains are available as well. All right, so closing up, again, the targeted treatment and prevention. The correct diagnosis allows for precise intervention. Treatment must be targeted to the specific pathogen, and broader public health measures are often essential to prevent transmission and future outbreaks, because they can be, it's very easily contamination within a family or within a daycare center. So the transmission is very easy by fecal oral route. Treatment is oftentimes metronidazole or nitroxanidine, and a couple of other different antiparasitic treatment. And again, public health measurements, cleanliness, avoidance of fecal oral route, and personal hygiene is really important to avoid these infections. And I think that's pretty much it for today. So look at the key takeaways. Differential pathogens and master of morphology. It's quite tricky to distinguish them, and especially the pathogenic ones versus the commensal ones. That is can be quite difficult. And think beyond the routine fecal float. You may have to use some of the specific stains or immunoassays for finding the parasites. Nowadays, a lot of this is done by multiplex PCR assays. And then again, know your patient's immune status. Also find out if they've traveled or if they've been outdoors to really finalize the diagnosis. So that's it for today.